And welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to the College Football Roundup Show with Daniel Vest and Seth Hagan. Seth, a wonderful weekend full of football. A few upsets, a lot of surprises. We got to find out who the man was in the SEC West, and a host of other things.
Man, it was like you said, it was truly exciting. Couldn't get enough. I was on the Auburn sidelines. That was crazy in its own right, but the day was just filled with great games, almost big upsets. There were some big upsets. We're going to take it through it all today, fellas.
Yeah, Mac Brown, for one, is going to be one thing we're going to talk about. Sure. He is definitely on the outs. That seat is as hot as you can imagine.
Hot as a Texas afternoon.
He is done. So we're going to get into that. We're going to also touch into a little bit of SEC action because, of course, we're in the region, and because, of course, the SEC is the best, hands down. We had a lot of good games coming through. Seth, though, your first impressions of the weekend.
Oh, man. First of all, I mean, number one on the list, we already mentioned it. Mac Brown losing to Ole Miss after losing big and giving up a lot of yards to everybody up there at BYU. It was a sad display, and unfortunately, when it rains, it falls in Texas. When it rains, it pours in Texas, rather. And I mean, just where do you see it getting brighter? I really don't see it. It eerily reminds me of Auburn last year. Just losing games that you're not supposed to, and it just snowballs from there.
No matter how good Texas does in the Big 12 this year, even if he beats Oklahoma, which is sad to say, in Texas, if you're going to do anything, that benchmark is, are you going to beat Oklahoma? And at this point, even if he beats Oklahoma, I don't know if the season can be salvaged. Right. But you never know. I mean, if he goes out and he goes undefeated the rest of the way, which I highly doubt,
right.
He
would have to do that at this point to save his job.
Absolutely.
One more loss, and they may cut him before the season ends.
You think he would resign mid-season?
I don't see him resigning. No. He's much too proud of a coach to do that. He's going to fight to the bitter end. They're going to have to oust him for him to be gone.
And we'll be talking about potential replacements for Mac Brown in the future going forward. Absolutely. And we'll talk about that a little later on because we've got some twists and something that Alabama fans may not like.
Some candidates.
Yeah.
Candidates.
So we'll get into that. My first impressions is Louisville and Kentucky. Teddy Bridgewater is one of the best players in college football right now. Yeah. He still had a decent game against Kentucky.
Decent.
250 yards, 16 of 28 with a touchdown. I mean, you would have liked to see him have a little more. And now, correct me if I'm wrong, but Kentucky does not have a stellar defense. So it wasn't like he was working against anything hard. I was a little surprised that Louisville came out a little flat and didn't do as good as people thought they would against Kentucky.
Sure. Because, I mean, Kentucky, they came out with a mindset that you haven't seen around that program in a couple of years, for sure. I mean, since Randall Cobb was with the program. I mean, it's been a while, folks.
Yeah.
And, what can you say about Coach Stoops, man? He's got them fired up. They believe to a certain extent. I mean, and for the first half, they were competing. They held them without a touchdown for a while.
They were down only 10-3 at halftime.
Yeah, and that's a prolific Louisville offense, folks.
Absolutely.
Don't get it twisted. Teddy Bridgewater's thrown at least 4 touchdowns in the first 2 games. So to hold them to 1 is massive.
Well, let's go into our first big game that we want to talk about, Seth, and that is, of course, the game of the year. This game we've been talking about and hearing about on street corners and barbershops at the grocery store and on every
garbage fires
and every all you hobos out there and every radio program you could ever listen to, Alabama and Texas A&M. Of course, now it started out as deja vu for Alabama.
Right.
Texas A&M goes up 14-0, but I tell you what, that Alabama Crimson Tide team is very resilient, finds a way to win that game, and has the ball last at the end of the game, which is really what it came down to. Because if Johnny Manziel would have had the football, it may have gone into overtime, but what a great job by Alabama to stick in there and score 49 points.
Yeah,
I would have never thought that out of Alabama.
No, not at all. And there were clues in the first 2 weeks. Texas A&M's defense was giving up a lot of points to really subpar schools. Here we're talking about Sam Houston State and Rice, I believe. So gave up a combined 56, 57 points to them, and turns right around and shows us just how porous their defense is. 49 is no small number, and yes, Johnny Football dropped that 42, but really and truly, once Alabama eclipsed that initial 14 points that they seemingly spotted, A&M, they really controlled it from then on.
And of course, Johnny Manziel, he got his, 464 yards passing, 5 touchdowns from Johnny Manziel, and he was only 2 yards away from getting 100 yards rushing. And, of course, so he did his magic. And, with those kind of players, they're going to do what they do because they're great players. And he had another Heisman moment against Alabama in which he was in the grasp of an Alabama defender behind the line of scrimmage, gets away miraculously, finds an open receiver. He really wasn't even open.
Eli Manning style, down the middle.
That's
it was
what a lot
crazy.
of people comparing it to.
It was crazy.
And it completes the pass. So a great job by Alabama. The guy like that is going to get his points. He's going to make his plays. You just have to score more than they did. And
against that A&M defense, you can.
Yeah,
you
absolutely.
Really can. And they're not a complete team.
And you were wondering about how Alabama would rebound coming off of not a great offensive game in their first game. There were some questions surrounding the offensive line and their youngness and cohesiveness and coming together. But not to say that Texas A&M has an awesome defensive line. They lost a couple key guys off of that line. They didn't really seem to have that many problems.
Yeah, DeMontre Moore was vital to that success, and you really see like how it really affects them. And they've got some guys coming in. They had guys suspended for the first 2 games, so they were getting their feet wet against Alabama, and those were key starters, protected starters for the Aggies who didn't get to play the first 2 games. Obviously, there's still some holes there. They can turn it back up. Important to mention that Johnny Football after the game said even Alabama lost a game last year, and it wasn't early in the season, and they still went to the national title. So anything's possible at this point. But now Alabama has to lose twice for you to even get to the SEC championship.
Absolutely.
So who's going to beat Alabama twice at this point?
A.J. McCarron had a very good game, 20 of 29 for 334 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. So just a marvelous game for A.J. McCarron, and why not? He's been in the system a long time, and he's a real leader on that team.
Yeah, it's almost hard to argue that at this point A.J. McCarron isn't a better quarterback than Johnny Manziel, because those 2 interceptions proved so costly. A pick in the end zone, and then you have a pick 6 that he threw in the red zone and took it all the way back. It was a crazy, great play by Alabama safety. I can't remember his name right now, but
Sincere.
Vinny Sincere. That's right. It was a great play and a great moment when he sidestepped and you see Johnny just sliding past him. He can't do anything about it.
Another good game is Alabama's running back, T.J. Yeldon, 25 attempts, 149 yards, and a touchdown. So a great game by him. Alabama just dominating. Next up, of course, the Auburn Tigers in the 10-game SEC losing streak, and they do it against Mississippi State, the Bulldogs, who now fall to 1-2. But Nick Marshall, the junior college transfer, leads the Auburn Tigers on a miraculous last-minute drive to win the game.
Man, you can't say enough about him, man. That he didn't get rattled. First time that you had to do something to win the ball game, and he did it. Say what you want. He threw a couple picks, but led them down calmly, hit the guys wide open, bang.
And one of those interceptions being a Hail Mary at the end of the first half.
Exactly.
So, I mean, if you want to count that, I mean, obviously it is an INT, but it wasn't one of those, like, mental mistakes, like, what are you doing?
Right.
So far he has only thrown, what, 1 or 2 interceptions all year.
All year.
When he had just as many or more interceptions that he did or touchdowns in his junior college. He finishes 23 of 34 for 339 yards, which is really good for Nick Marshall, really good and a really good sign for Auburn, and 2 touchdowns for Nick Marshall. Auburn's backfield, not a whole lot going on. They weren't really able to get a good running game going. Of course, about 3 or 4 guys shared the load there. Grant led all rushers with 44 yards on 8 attempts, averaging 5 yards a carry. And even still, Trey Mason had 10 attempts for 34 yards, 3.4 yards a carry. That's a pretty good carry average, I mean, for your running back.
Yeah, against that Mississippi State defense. People don't understand that that's going to be a really good defense going on in the season, and people will see as it manifests. But they've got 2 linebackers they're headed for the NFL at the end of the season. Guaranteed, folks. Trust me. Mississippi State's defense, we're going to hear about them going down, just going down the line. Obviously, we alluded to Nick Marshall and his passing yards, and he almost had more. He misses a wide open Sammy Coates Sammy had about 20 yards on the guy. All you got to do is just put it up there, just put it in a spot, and he's got it. So it could have been 400 yards, and that's already just this game without that one. More than both of his first 2 games combined.
Sammy Coates finishes with 3 receptions for 55 yards. Of course, the best receiver of the night came from Quan Bray, 3 receptions for 80 yards, excuse me, and a touchdown. Shifting gears from Auburn's offense to Auburn's defense, didn't look especially great against the run, was decent against the pass. Prescott was only, for Mississippi State, only 15 of 28 for 213 yards, no touchdowns, but he also ran for 133 yards and scored 2 touchdowns. So Auburn's, when you have a dual threat kind of type quarterback right there, that's what he does. But Auburn, against the other running backs, the more traditional, Perkins and Lewis. Perkins had 36 yards and Lewis had 15. But you've got to be able to stop that running attack.
Yeah, absolutely. And here's the thing about Auburn's defense right now. They're really struggling against quarterbacks that can move around. The most rushing yards that they've given in all 3 games have been to the quarterback. The quarterback has been the leading rusher against Auburn all 3 games to start the season. And they've really got to work that out, and I think they will, because they got D Ford back on Saturday night. He had a couple of good plays once he was able to get his rhythm back. Also back for the Tigers is Justin Garrett, that star position that we've been hearing. People were just gushing about him when we saw him, play a really good game in A-Day. So he was just getting his feet wet again, and that run defense will improve. I see it.
Y'all, if you would like to chime in, you're more than welcome to give us a call, 256-234-6221. We would love to hear what you have to say, what your opinions are on these games. You can go out of conference. You can talk about what we're talking about. It doesn't matter. We just let you go wherever you want to. But real quick, there's another game in the SEC that 2 SEC teams played each other, and that would be South Carolina and Vanderbilt. Now the Gamecocks rather opened that game up just big. I think they were up 21 or 28-0 before Vanderbilt ever decided to start scoring some points. And they ended up being a game at the end. South Carolina holds on by 10, 35-25. But what are your impressions of that game? South Carolina kind of put the brakes on, but Vanderbilt with a valiant comeback.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was impressed with how they started, obviously. Coming out, just really giving it to a good Vanderbilt team. Yeah. A team that lost a close game to Ole Miss, and they've only had one other game all season. So, I mean, they're just a solid group. A lot of people expected better things for Vanderbilt at this point in the season, but, what can you say? It's still South Carolina. They were still a projected top 10 team. They didn't lose by that much to Georgia, but you knew that there's holes in that defense from that Georgia game, and at some point you kind of saw Vanderbilt doing some damage, but at that point it was really just not worth it.
A good thing for Vanderbilt that you could take away if you're a Commodore fan is that they did hold the Gamecocks to only 7 points in the second half.
True.
I mean, and if you want to win ball games, you really do need to step it up in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
Real quick, going back to Auburn. Auburn has not allowed a touchdown in the fourth quarter in any of their games this year. So I mean, that's big when you're trying to make a comeback. So Vanderbilt ends up falling 35-25, and they fall to 1-2, while South Carolina goes to 2-1. Now we'll go to some other games, some really big games that were on Saturday involving SEC teams. And let's go ahead and go to the Big Daddy, and that would be Ole Miss and Texas. Ole Miss coming in, a very good team, 2-0 coming in, a prolific offense. Bo Wallace and those guys, they picked up right where they were last year, and Texas is reeling right now.
Oh man, that's just such a good word for it, because it just seems like how could it get worse? And you don't want to even ask that question, because the Big 12 isn't just going to lay down for Texas. We've seen that the last couple of years, man. They will have no mercy on these fellas. And if you have a defense that just gave up 44 to Ole Miss and 550 yards on the ground to BYU, you're just gonna get your whole hide tanned, because Texas Tech is coming. They had a big win over TCU on Thursday. I called the upset there. I wish I'd had this show beforehand to tell you guys that. I'm telling you, I picked that one, and I mean, the whole conference is top to bottom still very strong. So Texas is in for it.
Texas did lead at the half, 23-17, but Ole Miss just turned it on in the third quarter, and scoring 20 in that quarter and then 7 in the fourth to go on to win 44-23. Bo Wallace finished 17 of 25 with 177 yards and 2 touchdowns. Very modest for him. He also rushed 12 times for 57 yards. He had a touchdown. But Jeff Scott for Ole Miss, 19 carries, 164 yards, and a touchdown. He just went off.
Oh, man. That guy can go, and obviously with this Texas defense, that they're not very strong against that run. Jeff Scott took complete control, and I think the most telling stat, though, of this whole thing is that big old goose egg that Texas laid in the second half. Like, that's unacceptable.
It is.
Was it at Texas or at Ole Miss?
At Texas.
At Texas. So at home, you lay a goose egg. It's looking bad. Looking bad for Mac.
Mac Brown, unless he can pull something out of his rear end, he is on the outs, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. Next up, Seth, Tennessee and Oregon. And Oregon, Tennessee, this got a new coach, and
trying to build some momentum.
Absolutely. Well, the Saturday did not help. Oregon puts a shellacking on Tennessee, much like they did last year. Tennessee kind of makes it a game in the first quarter, and then Oregon just takes off.
Opens the can.
28 points in the second quarter. 3 touchdowns in the third. They go on to win 59-14. Is Oregon one of the best? They had 2 first place votes in the top 25 that just came out. Is Oregon one of the best team in the nation?
They're not. I'm not ready to say that they're the best team in the nation, because I want to see that game against Stanford. That game against Stanford, to me, decides the Pac-12. And that's not really a sure thing, because the state of Washington is playing some good football right now. Washington State and Washington playing some good football, so I'm not really ready to say that. I want to see them go up against a bona fide team, but I'm really disappointed in Tennessee. I wanted to see them have just a better effort overall. And to give that kind of effort, given it was on the road and you weren't expected to win anyway, but don't just get thumped again. Again, Tennessee? Again? No.
And Chip Kelly moving on to the NFL. Oregon has not missed a beat.
No, haven't missed a beat. I'm shocked. I am absolutely shocked. The way that their coach has just picked up where Kelly left off is mind-boggling. So props to him.
Arkansas and Southern Miss. Southern Miss now, Arkansas defeats Southern Miss 24-3. Southern Miss has now lost 15 in a row. Going back to last year,
very good.
Well, they went
what happened on Southern Miss?
We all know the story. 12-0, in 2011, and then Ellis Johnson becomes the head coach, and they go 0-12. It's one of the only times in college football history that that's ever happened, undefeated and then winless in the next season. But so they're still winless down there in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. Arkansas pulls that one out 24-3. Brett Bielema, new head coach at Arkansas. Of course, he's one of those pound 'em guys. He's going to run the ball on you no matter what. Arkansas had a lot of rushing yards. They had two running backs go over 100 yards. Jonathan Williams had 116 yards, and Alex Collins had 115 total. Arkansas had 258 yards rushing on 56 attempts. Arkansas just playing a little time control, ball control, and get the I wouldn't say easy win, but get the workman's win against Southern Miss.
For sure. Great game by the Hogs. They're starting off the season well, the way that they were supposed to, and I think it's between them and Auburn to see who either breaks into the upper echelon or just kind of stays behind with the other guys. I honestly don't see Mississippi State playing incredibly well down the stretch, even with that good defense. And when they get Tyler Russell back, they'll be a good team. But I really think it's between Arkansas and Auburn to see who breaks in, breaks out. Obviously, new coaches, so we'll see whose system is the best, because we had a little off-season drama, as we all know, between Bielema and Malzahn.
Absolutely.
Malzahn telling everybody, like, look, if you need some breaks, you got timeouts. You need them. So I mean, it was good to see that off-season banner, and I'm really looking forward to that game. And I'm really looking forward to Auburn LSU next week. Bringing up LSU.
Yeah, we'll get into those games next week here in just a moment. Real quick, let's touch on some top 25 games really quickly. UCLA and Nebraska, that was tabbed as a great game coming into it. 16th ranked UCLA and 23rd ranked Cornhuskers, and UCLA just puts a thumping on them. The black shirts down there in Nebraska. What has happened to the defense at Nebraska?
The
Bo Pelini is a defensive coach.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. Like he went up there, and I really haven't seen his fingerprint on the program. I've seen more Taylor Martinez than I've seen Bo Pelini, and that really confuses me, because he was an excellent coordinator at LSU for less. So yeah.
For the last 4 years at Nebraska, their total defense rank at the end of the year has gotten worse. I don't have it in front of me, but it has gotten worse each year in the last 4 years.
The only thing that's uglier than those jerseys was the defense out there, especially in that third quarter when UCLA dropped about 3 or 4 touchdowns on them. It was sad, but you really see why Brett Hundley, in retrospect, was named by a lot of people to be a Heisman candidate. Definitely stepped up, and that's probably the biggest win at UCLA in the last few years.
Of course, UCLA and Nebraska giving their condolences to UCLA, and UCLA really on an emotional high after one of their own, UCLA receiver Nick Pasquale was killed when he was struck by a vehicle just a week before. So that may have played into it as well. So that game was heavy in the hearts of the UCLA Bruins. Real quick, Seth, going on into the other top 25 action. Florida State, Jameis Winston, you and I actually had a chance to film this guy at Hueytown when he was there, and he is already, as a true freshman, in the Heisman talk, and he did it. He gave more talk this past weekend, 214 yards passing with 2 touchdowns, and led his team to a 62-7 win over Olympic Nevada.
Yeah, he's the real deal, folks. We like Daniel said, we saw it in high school. It is translated. I think he's a redshirt freshman, though. He had some time.
Okay, you're right.
He had some time to sit behind EJ, learn the system, and boy, has he learned it and become everything we thought he'd be. Damian Craig got him out of Mobile, snatched him from the clutches of Alabama and Auburn to bring him down there to Florida State. And Jimbo Fisher should be kissing his feet right now. He should take a trip to Auburn to kiss his feet, because the kid's a star, straight up.
Wisconsin ends up falling late to Arizona State. I don't know if you got to catch that game. I know you were working.
I did not catch that.
I know you were working the game at Auburn, but Wisconsin was leading Arizona State for most of that game, and then the Sun Devils come back and score 13 in the fourth to take the lead and end up winning.
Last play.
On the last play. So Wisconsin ends up falling. There's an upset there. Oh, by the way, we missed one earlier in the SEC. LSU did kill Kent State, but what's there to talk about with that? They just rolled over them.
However, Zach Mettenberger, I did want to mention, is very good. Very good. 9 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. That's the big number there, folks. And he's not turning the ball over. Has clearly blossomed to a certain extent under Cam Cameron. And, we'll see how good he really is against Auburn, because he had a really poor showing against them last year.
Absolutely.
Against an Auburn team that didn't really do anything else the rest of the season against good competition.
Or anybody.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll see. We'll see next week.
And, of course, the Thursday game, TCU was upset by Texas Tech 20-10. What did you think about that?
Texas Tech, a team on the rise, folks. Like I said, if I
had been here to tell you, I would have told you. Did Tommy Tuberville leave the cupboard full for the Texas Tech coaching staff?
I mean, he's always had solid recruiting classes. He didn't leave Texas Tech a big old gaping hole like he left Auburn. But to an extent, he gave him some good players. Tommy's always been able to develop talent really well. But you also have to give credit to Cliff Kingsbury, who was Texas A&M's offensive coordinator last year, and has come back to his old school where he used to be a great quarterback under Mike Leach, and has really re-energized the program, because people were thinking like, wow, Tommy, you left us for Cincinnati. Like, are we that bad? But I think things are looking up there.
College football roundup here on College Country 97.5. You're welcome to give us a call. We would love to hear from you. 256-234-6221. Real quick before we end the show, Seth, we're going to talk about some matchups coming up next week. And I have one that I am especially wanting to see, and that is Tennessee and Florida. How can Tennessee bounce back, or can Tennessee bounce back? And is Florida, can their offense score some points enough to win? They are playing at home, so that is good for Florida. Right now, the line is 14.5 for Florida. That's my game that I'm looking forward to.
Interesting. Yeah, it's one of those like make or break games. It's one of those, like, something's got to give here. Will Florida finally be able to click with their offense against a obviously pretty bad Tennessee defense, or vice versa? Will Tennessee make this a good game and score some points on what is a very talented, at least, Florida defense? It's just they've really got to work on that offense, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see, because the winner of that game, I think, is the team that will challenge Georgia and South Carolina down the road.
I'm going to take Florida in that one, but I'm going to take it. I'm going to take the under on that.
Yeah.
Also, another huge game is Auburn and LSU. How good is Auburn as they face a really staunch LSU defense? How good is LSU's offense going against a rebuilding Auburn defense? Last year, that was a very close game in Auburn. 12-10, won by LSU. Surprised just about everybody.
Like we said earlier, Auburn D, no slouch in the second half.
Sure, absolutely. But can they get it done on the road? Now, this is a huge game. Baton Rouge is one of the toughest places to play, Death Valley. Can Auburn pull out the victory?
To me, it's still if Auburn was at home again, I could really see it. But what really jumps out to me is that even though some turnovers have been weird for Auburn, they've still been coughing up the ball. They've still been throwing picks, and LSU is a team that's really going to make you pay for that, because if you give them a short field, they're going to pound you with those 3 great running backs they have: Alfred Blue, Jeremy, that other guy that I can't remember, but he's really good too. I mean, it's like Auburn's running backs to me. It's like whatever you hit them with, that's a good player, and they're all blue chips. So
absolutely,
I don't see Auburn getting over the hump just yet, but I do see them making it competitive.
The line on that one starting out right now. Of course, these do fluctuate as the week goes on, but LSU -16. I'm going to take LSU, and I'm gonna go in the under on that one as well.
Sure.
The rest, there's not really great games going on in the SEC. North Texas travels to Georgia. Vanderbilt plays Massachusetts, or UMass, if you want to call it. Southern Methodist. SMU travels to Texas A&M. Arkansas will go to Rutgers. Rutgers is a 1-point favorite there. Troy, here in Alabama, the Troy Trojans, formerly known as Troy State, travel to Mississippi State, and maybe the Bulldogs can get a rebound win there and get a tune-up. And Missouri, another team that I just really still hasn't clicked that they're an SEC team because they haven't done anything. And I don't even know.
They're like half an SEC member. They got like 13 and a half members. They're not quite there yet. They haven't really earned any respect. I honestly completely forgot about them at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
I didn't even think about them.
Well,
how are they doing, by the way? What's their record? What are they doing?
Well,
are they?
I'm not even.
I'm worth mentioning. I want to use airtime for this.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't even see them on the SEC.
Oh man, this is bad.
Thing here.
Missouri fans, call in and let us know.
Missouri is, in fairness, Missouri is 2-0.
Okay.
They defeated Toledo, 38-23.
Toledo's a good program.
Yeah.
They go the wrong way sometimes, but they're a pretty good program.
Yeah, well, and Missouri will be playing Indiana, of course, a Big 12 team. And so that should be a win for them. Other top 25 action games we're looking forward to. North Carolina State had they, if you remember last year, tripped up Florida State, I want to say, at home and ruined their national championship hopes. And they'll be playing host to Clemson on Thursday night. So that'll be a very good game, too. Make sure you tune in for that one. Other games of interest that you might want to know about in the top 25, Arizona State will travel to Stanford. That should be a pretty good game.
Should be good.
What are your thoughts on that?
Arizona State is definitely a team on the rise, but Stanford is top 2 in the conference, and I look for them to pull away. Definitely in the second half.
There'll be another chance for Teddy Bridgewater to pad his stats as Florida International comes calling down in Louisville, Kentucky.
Hide your kids.
Washington plays host to Idaho State. Not a whole lot of great games next week, except for the SEC. So next time we'll, Seth, where we wrap up, do you have any final thoughts?
Final thoughts? Just one game that I would like to see next year, this coming Saturday, rather. Just because it was such a great high-scoring game last year, we got Louisiana Monroe and Baylor hooking up again. Big scoring. If that's your thing, lots of points, no defense, track plays, track meet. Yeah, just tune in to Fox Sports 1 if you have that on your dial there on DirecTV and whatnot.
I'm looking forward to, as I said before, Tennessee, Florida, and really I'm looking forward to Auburn, LSU, just to see, just to gauge where Auburn is. And now it's going to be really interesting to see how Nick Marshall handles the noise of an SEC crowd
that doesn't like him.
That doesn't like him. That's going to be a real test for him. So, ladies and gentlemen, we hope you've had a great time. We have had a great time. Next time we'll get into NFL. We'll talk some fantasy news and advice for you as well. And that all comes next week on the college football final here on Kalijah Country 97.5. We're out of here. I'm Daniel Vest.
And I'm Seth Hagan.
And we are gone.
See you.